Getting hurt is a pain. So is being sick. I'm not a doctor, but sometimes I wish I were. I dislike pain intensely, and I don't like to see it in others. Many times, I would like to be able to do something to heal people who are suffering. Thankfully, there are people around who can.
If you've ever had trouble gluing the parts back together on a broken airplane, you know how hard that can be. It might be easier to just go out and buy a new one. That's what we often do. Something breaks, and we throw it away and buy a new one. For some things, that is. If the broken part happens to be the bone in your leg, well, that's different. You don't just throw it away and get a new leg. Someone has to fix it. There are 206 bones in your body. The bones in your arms and legs are called long bones. They consist of a shaft and two ends. The shaft is basically a strong tube of compact bone. Yellow or red bone marrow fills the inside of the tube. The two ends have a compact outer shell and a spongy interior. Even though bones are strong, they can break. How do you fix a bone? If it was a model airplane, I'd use glue. If it was my leg, I'd use metal plates, pins, and screws. Orthopedists are doctors who specialize in operating on joints, muscles, and bones to fix them when something goes wrong. Sometimes these are used to fix bones: screws, pins, and metal plates. The plates and screws are made of stainless steel. The reason they're stainless steel is so that they don't get corroded by the action of body fluids on them. Let's find out how they are used. This is an X-ray of the leg of a person who is riding a motorcycle. He was sideswiped and his right leg was broken. There are three major bones in your leg. The thigh bone is called the femur. The shin bone is called the fibula, and this bone on the side of the leg, the tibia. In this case, there's a compound fracture. Compound means the bone had broken through the skin. The fibula and tibia were broken in several places. This is a Mueller compression plate. It can be used to put a bone back together again. Once the wound is cleaned out, the holes are drilled into the bone with a mechanical or gas-powered drill. The holes are threaded so that the screws fit tightly. They are inserted in such a way that the bone is drawn together as the screws are tightened. The skin is then sewn up and the bone left to heal. The thigh is checked regularly to see that the bone is healing. The plate will be taken out in about 12 to 18 months once the bone has grown back together again. Because the fibula and tibia were so shattered in the case of this motorcycle accident, the pieces were held in place by three sets of pins called external fixators. Holes were again drilled into the bone pieces and the pins were screwed in. Each set of pins was lined up so as to keep the bone straight and were then attached to each other with metal rods. This kept the bone pieces from moving around while they grew back together. The pins will be taken out in about 3 months if all goes well. Once the pins are removed, the holes grow shut. Healing takes time. You cannot shortcut the healing process. But thankfully, God has made us in such a way that healing can take place.
We'll be back in a moment. Not all of our hurts come from broken bones, bleeding cuts, and black eyes. We feel a lot of pain when we see other people hurting, or when someone close to us walks out on us, or even dies. Where do you turn at such a time? Some people turn to alcohol or drugs, or try to cover the pain in another way. It's good to know that God is watching us. He knows what's happening, and we can ask Him for His loving hand to come in and comfort us.
Humpty and Hertha sat on a wall. Hertha had a great fall. And poor Humpty fell completely apart. The Bible says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit."
Hurts that need healing can come from many places. One of the most common and most devastating is the tongue. People have carried the pain for years that they got from the cutting words from teachers, parents, friends, or other family members. The tongue is a powerful little instrument. Never forget it.
The tongue is a small thing, but it can cause a lot of trouble. It's a flame of fire, like a match in a dry forest. But a tongue can do a lot of good, especially when it speaks wisdom from God and spreads peace, gentleness, and goodness.
We can learn a lot about life by watching animals. Unfortunately, some animals are hidden away where only a few people get to see them. Like on the ocean floor, for example. But even there, creatures have a hard time getting along with each other.
This large gray fish is known as a wolffish. It's an aggressive fish, and it has very large teeth, which it uses to crush lobsters and crabs, quahogs. It comes in during the springtime months to mate, and it can be found lying in around the rocks and boulders around the kelp in the area. The diver is trying to form some kind of a relation with the wolffish just by patting it slightly to show that it doesn't mean any harm. The wolffish is actually not really attacking the diver more than he's just trying to threaten the diver away with an open mouth, just saying, please leave me alone, I don't want to be bothered. The wolffish at any time can swim away very rapidly. He can swim much faster than the diver. So he's just giving the divers, just letting them know that he's shouldn't be fooled around with, and that he's has the teeth to back it up with. The wolffish has teeth which should be respected, because they've been known, when brought aboard lobster fishing boats, they've been known to take broomsticks or gaffs and snap them in half with their huge, powerful teeth. But this wolffish now has become a little bit used to the petting of the divers, and is less aggressive with gentle handling, and allows the divers actually to play with it. The female, which this wolffish probably is a little bit smaller than the male wolffish. When they mate, they lay their eggs in among a cave, and the male stays and guards the eggs until they hatch, while the female leaves and goes back to open water where it's much deeper.
We'll be back in a moment. Hurts and crises that come into our lives can take a long time to heal. We think that it's terrible that these bad things should happen to us. On the other hand, these experiences change us. They're opportunities to make us better people. That's probably one reason why God doesn't always spare us from them, even if He could. He wants us to mature by them. This is the story of some people who worked for a long time to deal with the hurts and problems in their lives. Really, it was God who changed them.
Yeah, I came from a pretty large family. It was about 12 of us in the family. And I'd say, well, I'd be the black sheep out of the whole works of them. Me, I was just pretty left alone, and a lot of them would just basically say that I was sort of hopeless, because they seen the direction I was taking, and they didn't have nothing to do with me.
Being brought up in a little northern community as far north as Churchill, I lived there for a number of my young days, like up to 13 years old, and we later on moved on to a bigger city. My dad...
Well, I got into, I guess you could say, the wrong crowd, but with that crowd came along the peer pressure in that, and it was just hard for me to, even if I wanted to try to study and get into it, I still wanted to be a part of the so-called cool crowd or whatever. Eh? And while I was doing this, I slowly started to get into, then the thing to do was the sniffing glue part, and we started experimenting with all different types of glue and things like that, and we'd have sniffing parties and garbage sheds, and it just got pretty bad where you get space.
I guess being Métis, I didn't understand, because my dad being white and my mom being Indian, I couldn't find out who I was really. And so as I did these things, I continued to search around and try to find something more to life. But when you're only about 13, 14 years old, you can get into a lot of scary things out there. And that's basically what happened until I was able to have enough, and I went back to my family, and they were always there for me, but I guess I myself too was the type that just wanted to run my own life and figured that, you know...
But through those times I spent a lot of hungry times, lots of times, even sleeping in ditches, in parks, all over the place, you know, and my thoughts then was, had nothing to do with education or anything. It was just total rebellion. I just wanted to do what I wanted to do, and there was nobody who was going to tell me what to do, sort of thing. And it's just like I was given the rope, sort of thing, just you know, enough rope out there so I can, you know, tie myself up pretty good, and which I did. But
it was funny because we never knew where each of us came, but basically we came from the same kind of an upbringing, same kind of lifestyle. We were both two people that didn't know what life consisted of, and we chose to go the wrong road. And when me and Derek met, we began to do drugs. I basically smoked a lot of dope and I drank a lot, but my husband started introducing me into heavier chemicals where, you know, I myself knew nothing about, but later on it became a habit for me because this is how he lived, and because I fell in love with him at such a young age, I figured, and he loved me. That was the biggest thing in my life, was to have somebody that could really love me and understand me, and vice versa. And together we did our carousing and led up to marriage, and later on our little boy was born. And we knew what we put ourselves into. We weren't just two people that didn't know what marriage was about. We knew that there was a price to be paid, but we had no counselors. We had nobody to instruct us or help us along the way. We basically learned just through experience.
One day we were doing some hallucinogens, me and a friend of mine, and something very peculiar happened to us. It seemed like we were gonna die at that moment, and so we kind of got scared. We went out on the road and all this stuff, and ended up at a church. And he remembers a fella that when he was in jail in a youth home, there was a fella in there who was a Christian and had told him about Jesus Christ. But at that time, of course, he just let it go in one ear and out the other. But at this time, when we were in that situation, he remembered this fella, and so what happened was he contacted him, and this guy came down to tell us about Jesus, you know. And when things slowly started to calm down a bit, you know, I thought, well, maybe it was just a bad trip. He started chatting with my friend first of all, and I was sort of in another room thinking in my mind. I thought, well, gee, I don't want to go through with this. And my friend came in and said, yeah, I just gave my life to Jesus. And I thought, oh, well, gee, that's good for you. And then I had no way to get out there in time, and this guy came up to me and he says, would you like to give your life to Jesus? And at first I felt just pressured. So I just obliged him and said yes. You know, I wasn't too sure what I was getting into. He told me, he says, okay, well, say the sinner's prayer. So I basically said it and asked God into my heart and to be Lord and Savior of my life, not expecting anything, but at that moment when I asked him into my heart, just tremendous feeling came over me, like somebody took a bucket of water, dumped it over the top of my head, came all the way through my whole body, from my toes up. This churning motion, like a cleaning out, was happening inside of me. And as it got closer and closer to the top, I was fighting and fighting as hard as I could not to cry. I just refused to cry, but no matter how much I refused, I just couldn't help it any longer. I burst out crying, and it was quite a weight that was lifted off of me. And right from that moment on, my life was never the same again since Jesus Christ came into it.
Thank God that He's taken all these bad memories and has allowed them to be a blur, and has healed many of the hurts that have happened in our lives that we can't really remember. And I myself am thankful that through it all, that I always knew that I loved Christ the day that I myself was ready to kill myself and commit suicide at a young age, and how Christ had revealed and showed His power and had intervened on my behalf and had restored my life that night. And all the way through, I always knew that God was there in my life, always taking and keeping me. And even while I married yet my husband and having my children, and up to this point, God has always directed and guided us, and we just give Him all the praise and the glory that He's been the head of our household, and Christ is alive, and He is in our life and in our homes. And He can make a real difference because He's made one in our lives.
We'd like to hear from you at The Third Story. When you write, we'll send you a free survival kit, something to help you get to know God better. It includes a poster with Bible verses on it, a Bible study book with a book of the Bible, a book of cartoons and stories, and a helpful book of Bible verses for the whole family. Write for your free kit to The Third Story, Box 2, Station F, Winnipeg, Manitoba. That's The Third Story, Box 2, Station F, Winnipeg, Manitoba. We'll be waiting to hear from you. One way to describe good health is to say that it's when we're at peace with God and ourselves. God's strength shows up best in us when we're weak. It's at times like that when He can change us for the better. We don't remain where we were, but with His help, we become what we should be.
The parts of the body, each one in its own place, separate from the others, until something comes up. And that's when all those parts need each other. So what happens if, let's say, the other parts of the body gang up and decide, hey, what good is an ear to us? We don't need it. Let's forget about it. Oops, no play. Or what if the left hand rebels and decides not to catch the ball? No play again. If one part skips out, everybody suffers. The whole team. And the kicking. Who does that? The left foot or the right? Well, they can't both do it at the same time. They'll have to cooperate. One foot will have to stay back, while the other one gets the cheers, or the boos. The head has decided. The right foot will kick. The head telling everybody what to do. The ear listening. The eyes watching. Both hands ready. The left foot poised. The right foot and... all the parts of the body working together, helping to get the job done.
And you don't have the strength inside you to stay afloat. And all around you feel there's a raging storm. Just call on Jesus, He'll save you and keep you from harm. And you will survive. You will survive. Place your trust in Jesus and you will survive. Sometimes you might feel you're at the end of your rope. And nobody's there to understand you or help you cope. But don't you give up now, don't you ever give in. Just call on Jesus, He'll be there, He will be your friend. And you will survive. You will survive. Place your trust in Jesus and you will survive. You will survive. You will survive. Place your trust in Jesus and you will survive.